our track. Without taking much time, because we've already crossed 2 o'clock, I'll just say a couple of things. That today from 2 onwards to 5 p.m. there are 4 sessions back to back. Please stick around. And tomorrow we have more 3 sessions starting from 11 a.m. All right?
Welcome everyone. Very excited to have you join for us for the IGDC art track. Washrooms are that way. If you're feeling hungry, I have some energy bars in my bag. But sit through for the 4 sessions. We have a really good lineup. We'll first of all start with welcoming my friend Justin Will. He's creative and art director with 14 years of experience. He's been living in Southern California, and he's very specialized with working for creating gaming key art, film and television key art, finishing packaging and logo design. And he has collaborated and supported publishers on the games for Activision, Microsoft, Bandai Namco, 2K Games, EA Games, Meta, and Sega, and more. And today's topic is about the key to making key art. So without any delay, let's welcome Justin.
Hello, everyone.
All yours, man.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited to be here, and thank you for attending my key art talk. Just a quick show of hands here. How many people are students? That was quite a bit. How many people here, show of hands, know what key art is? Okay, I've got some explaining to do. So key art essentially is the promotional marketing material for a game or a movie. So it's basically the first image you see when you walk in the store for your game. A little bit about me. I went to school for graphic design with an emphasis on key art. And I landed an internship that lasted about a year and ended up being where I started working for the next 7 years of my career, which was a company called Petrol Advertising, and then various other agencies after that. What I'd like to do first is sort of walk you through some of my portfolio, some of the works I've worked on in the past, so that you get a sense of who I am as an artist, and a sense of the projects that I've worked on in the past as well. So again, key art. I'm just going to walk you through a section that's specifically gaming key art, but there will be multiple sections throughout the presentation. So you can see 2K Games, Activision, various different titles. I've been very fortunate and lucky to have worked on all these projects as an artist, an art director, and a creative director. And perhaps you've seen quite a few of these, at least I hope so. So our next section here is a little bit different from key art, but this is marketing art. So this is something that you would see essentially when a season pass is dropped or a DLC. The game requires additional artwork for that to support it. So this is some of the work I've been doing with Treyarch for the last 2 years as a freelance artist. Just a bunch of different bundles within the game itself that can be purchased. And then moving on to theatrical key art, along my career path, I've had a lot of opportunity to work on film as well, TV shows and movies. So I'll walk you through a few of the ones that I've done in the past as well. Godzilla versus Kong being one of my favorite posters I've ever had the opportunity to work on. John Wick is another fantastic one, in Dune, as well as Shang-Chi. And then logo design. Typography happens to be a very passionate sector of design for me. I love designing with type, and I especially love designing logos. So here are some of the logos. Here are some of the logos I've done in the past. Battlegrounds, Gears of War 5, Call of Duty, 2K Games, Back 4 Blood being one of my favorite logos. So you can see I've kind of been around the block. And then additionally, I'd like to show a few logos that I've done for Treyarch as well for some of these bundles. These are really fun logos to do because they're very expressive. And again, like I said earlier, I absolutely love typography, so I have tons of fun doing type. And then another sort of avenue that I enjoy in design as well is packaging design for various games as well. And this includes steelbooks, specialty packaging design, maybe disc design. It really kind of varies from game to game. And then to kick off this presentation, I'd like to kind of move into some design principles that I use personally as an artist. And I think a lot of artists have different sort of rule sets. These are just ones that I kind of go by, but every artist is different, every agency is different in process. But this is just some of my past experience. So one of the most important things in key art design for games, I feel, is the concept, the idea. How do you distill the game down to a singular, simple image and be able to convey the messaging behind the game, but do it in an effective way that is visually stunning, and it can set itself apart from games on the shelf that are next to it in a store. One of my favorite examples of this is XCOM 2. We have the game is about fighting, your soldiers fighting aliens. How do you convey this message about battle between humans and aliens? So conceptually, how do you convey that message in a singular, simple manner? So here we have the main alien silhouette, but if you look really close, there's individual skulls within the alien. So there's this sort of symbology behind it, that there's this impending doom amongst humans. Another concept I'm a big fan of as well is BioShock. This is actually BioShock Collection, so it's encompassing 3 different BioShock games. But how do you show that in a simple manner? How do you show 3 games in one cover? So my solution was to split the worlds in sort of this half cutout image. So you have BioShock 3. I'm sure some of you are familiar with BioShock, but the third BioShock takes place in the sky, and then the first 2 take place in the underwater, and then you have the logo and lighthouse sort of anchoring that image together. And then Call of Duty, I think the temptation is when you're working on an action game to show explosive, wild action and go crazy. But it seems that if you can sort of distill the image down in a beautiful, iconic way, it still does a great amount of storytelling without having to overwhelm the viewer and complicate the design. And then another thing I look into is emphasis and focal point. Identify the most important elements, such as characters, key items, action, and make them the most prominent part of the image to draw the viewer's eye. So what is the most important thing about your game, and how do you put that to the forefront? That's the first thing you want to see, right? So it's important to make that sort of well-balanced and loud. There's a few examples of it. 2K15, for example, you have John Cena dead front in the center. He's the first read. He's the first thing you see. So he has a lot of emphasis on him, and the eye is drawn to him. And then color and contrast. This is very important. Use color to evoke the game's atmosphere and genre. Apply contrast to make key elements stand out, using brightness and shadow to create depth and drama. So using this red from Gears of War to kind of create this mood and tone for Marcus, your main character, or using strong contrast in this Dying Light 2 image. The foreground is very darkly lit while the background has a strong light, and then the main characters are being popped off that light edge, or light background, excuse me. So it's a very strong, quick read. It's very important that whenever you're doing key art, that the read is very easy. You can read the image at a small size, a thumbnail, and a large size, right? So it's important to be legible. Legibility is very, very key. A few more examples of color contrast. Beat Saber, for example, utilizes complementary colors. So I'm using about 75% purple in this, and then complementing it with about 25% orange. One of my favorite color palettes is turquoise and orange red, so you'll see that a lot in my art. But essentially, again, we're using 30% turquoise and 70% orange and red. And then balance and composition. Arrange elements to create a visually stable or dynamic composition. This could be symmetrical balance for stability or asymmetrical balance for a more active feel. So you have Destiny 2, this character art. The character is centered up directly in the center, so your eye kind of goes to the absolute center of that image, and it's balanced by the weight of the image. So you still have some negative space, and then you have a framing device around your character that draws your eye into that focal point. Whereas for Mafia Definitive Edition, you sort of have this asymmetrical balance, which adds a little bit of dynamic energy to it. And then hierarchy, another important keynote, guiding the viewer's eye through the composition by ranking elements by importance using size, color, and placement. For example, a hero character might be positioned in a way that naturally draws the eye first. So Judgment, for example, my eye goes directly to the center, and then you read this second read of his face, shushing the viewer. And then whereas you have Midnight Suns, we have our main characters in the front, and they step back and get smaller in size because we're showing a hierarchy. As well as, shape design is in this. There's actually a visual V cutting through the image as well, reinforced by the negative space in the back. Movement's a key point as well. You create a sense of direction or energy in the artwork, even in a static image, to make it feel more dynamic and engaging. So we all know that a lot of these images are static. They're not animated. They're not moving. But in a design sense, you can actually use visual lines to create a sense of movement within the composition. For example, John Cena on 2K15, once again, we have this line cutting through the composition, drawing your eye through. Another favorite example on a more recent piece is Exile Edge. We have our main characters here off to the side. However, we have this planetary cable wrapping around the composition, moving your eye, leading your eye to the actual logo itself. So if you look at it as a whole, we're actually kind of doing this spiral into that logo. And then proportion. Proportion is key, maintaining correct proportions for characters and objects to ensure that they look realistic and believable within the game's world. So this is really important for kind of making sure that essentially some of the characters don't look out of size. Like maybe you have a character next to another character, but he doesn't look like he's too tiny or he's a giant. You have to be able to use depth for example, here too, we have the White Ranger. He's a little bit bigger, and then the Green Ranger here is a little bit smaller, but they feel like they're still in the same shot proportionately. And then lighting and shadow. There's a lot that goes into lighting and shadow. Using lighting to guide the viewer's eye and tell a story. Strong highlights and deep shadows can add dramatic, cinematic quality and help define the shape of the characters. So one thing here you can see the main character, he's actually painted down into dark values so that we don't need to see all of his details all the time. You got to remember that we want to simplify things, simplify the image, make it easy to read. So we should be choosy where we pick where we want to see our details. For example, we obviously want to see his face because he's an important character. We want to see some of his gear, and within his silhouette, you can see his rifle details as well. Another thing that's really important too, that is kind of defined by lighting, is the silhouette value of the character. So we need to be able to read the shape of the character and understand what his pose is and what his position is. And then another thing too, I like to mention as well is on Battlefield Portal 2, you can see as well, all the detail is lit here on the top sides of the characters, but as you move down here, the details start to fade away a little bit. So we don't need all those details. We're really trying to simplify the art. Treatment comes in many different forms. Treatment can be something that is illustrated texturally or comic book style. Not all key art has to be a 3D model with, or a hyper photographic image. Not all games require that. A lot of games are stylized, right? And so we want to convey that stylization through our art as well. For example, here you could see in Rage 2, the colors are yellow and pink in the background. That's not reality in real life, but it's stylized, and it's interesting to look at visually. The character is still photographic, but we still have sort of this unique stylization happening on here. There's paint strokes kind of strewn across through here. And then another example is Doom Eternal. So Doom Eternal is this originally the client was looking for a metal style album cover, and a lot of metal album covers are kind of illustrated. So I took inspiration from that, and this image here you can see is kind of fully illustrated in that sense. Now the next slide I want to go into is asset development. So when you're creating key art, you're going to need assets, right? You need something to work with. So a few examples of that is when you work on a game, maybe it's a 3D game and you have a 3D character such as Sonic, for example. You'll get a 3D render from your 3D team. However, it might not have all the glitz and glam it needs. For example, here, this is the raw render out of Maya, and if you look in his eye, Sonic's eye, the eye feels flat because there's no reflection in the eye, right? And typically eyes are wet, so they will have a reflection. So in post work, taking that 3D asset and adding a little bit of shine into the eye to make it feel alive, as well as pumping up rim lights or adding extra details, cleaning up polygons. Sometimes you get a 3D model that requires a lot of cleanup, and there's a weird artifacts within the 3D model itself, so you need to be able to clean that up. Here's another example. This is a raw render that was done in Maya. And then if you move on to this one, I went and added details to make it feel a little bit more alive, a little bit more detailed. The raw render did not come with skin pores or eyelids or eye hairs. You could see the difference, as well as adding textures to the lips to kind of really help that image pop and feel alive. Another example of this too, up here is the 3D raw render, and then down here you have the version that's been illustrated to feel a little bit more photographic and alive. Another great example here, this is for Exile Edge. This is a recent game that is due this year, I believe. So this is the raw render. This one I actually rendered myself in Blender and posed myself in Lit. And then I took that image, and you got to think, this character's name is Alter, so he's the main character of this story. He's sort of this battle-torn character who has all these fights and battles with enemies. And when you're doing those sort of moves, you tend to get damaged, or you get dirt or debris on you, or you want your character to feel lived in, like they've experienced that life within the game. So sometimes when you get a raw render, you have to treat it as such. For example, here you can see I added bullet holes in his armor because he's fighting battle. He's going to get hit. He's going to get attacked. A torn cape with movement. His cape is not going to be perfect for the next 12 hours, right? Because he's fighting bad guys. And then I'll go in and add little details where I control how much I want the viewer to see. So, for example, if you look at the raw render here on the left, some of these lines kind of blend a little bit, and I went in and painted a little bit of rim light to help separate that. So this goes back to silhouette value as well. I want the viewer to easily see the anatomy of the character. So there's little tricks in there. I also made the raw render wasn't very metallic, when it came out. So you can see I add a little bit of shine to some of the armor, and I helped add micro contrast as well within the character to help be able to define these details at a distance. Logo design, one of my favorite design ventures, as mentioned earlier. I absolutely love logo design. Some of the things I consider when I'm creating logos is concept first and foremost, and that goes for key art as well. And these principles can be applied to both designing logos and designing key art. So concept, font choice, color, contrast, balance, hierarchy, treatment, shape design, and customizing type. So when I was making this, I don't want to choose a font like Papyrus, for example, which is an Egyptian-style font. I want to choose something that gives the sense of like, masculinity or danger. So what I did is I chose this font, and then I customized it by adding texture to it, grit, so it feels like, again, like this is a zombie game. We want it to feel gritty and scary. And then I had to think of a unique way to include the four. And I came up with the solution by adding the four, using the negative shape of back and blood to create this four. And then you see there's sort of blood streaks, graphic streaks coming off the logo to once again kind of redefine that this is a zombie game. And then this is a piece that I did about a year ago for Treyarch in Black Ops 6. This is one of the logos in the in-bundle store. And these are a little bit more fun and conceptual. There's a little bit more going on in them. So you can see I have customized type. The S is a little bit larger. The E is a little bit larger than the rest. And then I wanted to think of a way to show, a little bit more of this C action. So what I did was I thought about maybe I can use this pearl to create the O shape within the Seaborns. It's a fun little way to inject some of that C style into it. And then Battlegrounds. This is a game that I did a logo for 2K Games. Again, customizing the font. So you could see that the type is actually, each letter is sort of off kilter and moving around a little bit, because this is an action wrestling game. So I want to think about ways to inject this sort of energy and dynamic feel, as well as chipping away little points of the logos themselves to make it feel a little bit more customized. The original concept for this was I wanted the letters to feel like they're smashing together, almost like you're doing a wrestling move and you're suplexing someone and the type just goes. So always thinking of ways to sort of get that messaging inside of the logos themselves. So if the logo can stand by itself, singular image without the key art, and you still understand what the game is about, that's sort of the goal that I always look for. And then this is another logo I did for Treyarch Black Ops 6 bundle. It's called Olympus Bolt. So I wanted to figure out a way on how to inject a bolt inside of this logo. So the idea I came up with using this back plate here and pulling the bolt down through the O itself. Again, you want your logos to stand by themselves without the key art and be able to understand what the game is about, or in this example, what the bundle is about. Finishing is another aspect that's involved in gaming key art as well. So whenever you have a final image that the client has approved, you need to go through this, what's called a finishing pass. And this finishing pass, basically you take the key art and you fix all the small mistakes. You're basically getting it ready for final print. And something else a finisher does is they will take your image. When you design an image this size, they will take that image and blow it up big so that that image can be used anywhere for print. For example, maybe a billboard. You need a big image, because if you don't have a big image on a billboard, you're just going to get a blurry image, and that's no good for anybody. So here's an example of a final finished piece. that I did finishing for Exile Edge. What I did was I went in and just cleaned up all the files, made sure that everything made sense within the file, made sure there was no weird polygons or artifacts within the file, made sure that everything made sense. And the client is usually involved in this process because that it's their game, so that they usually have feedback in this process as well. You could see, so this is the before and after. This is the one that was approved by the client, and then I took it into this. This was the final pass. So this is the finished version of the image. So in this section here, I've included a key art process example. As I've mentioned before, a lot of agencies work differently from each other, but it's very similar. Me as a freelance artist, this is my particular process. But again, just keep in mind that this is what works for me, and this is what has worked for me in the past. So that's just take it with a grain of salt. This is the main page. I usually create an intro page for these decks that I send to clients. These are called a pitch deck. So Exile Edge, key art exploration. So when we run through this, there's going to be about 20 samples of what I pitched to the client. And you'll notice that the final version of this key art is very different from what was pitched to the client. This is typical. This does happen. It's part of the process. It's my job to help figure out what the client wants or what the client needs. So you'll see here, conceptually, I was trying to focus on the mask because I felt that the mask in Exile Edge was very unique and very ownable as a brand. So I did, some of my focus was on the mask. So you see some of these samples were based on the mask. But I also wanted to include, a little scene up top built within it. I wanted to do it in kind of an interesting way. Anytime I do a page in my pitch deck with key art samples, I will include a reference so that the client can see, maybe it's a textural reference or compositional reference, but I always keep reference. And you'll notice that this is a very crude image. It's not its final form. It's very crude, so it's very chopped up and messy. But what I'm trying to do is show the client, this is what I'm thinking about, this is what I want to do. If they approve this image, or they want to move on to the next round with this image, then I'll go ahead and start to flush it out and pose out the character and start building it properly. But if I'm going to send the client 20 ideas, I can't spend 5 hours on each one to get to the final. So I have to show just quick mock-ups of what it would look like. Some more samples. The client also wanted me to explore dynamic energy with the characters because the character is sort of ninja-like. He's very fast-paced, and he's always battling multiple enemies. And then again, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to focus on the mask because I thought that was one of the most important things I was seeing from this game. It was very ownable and iconic, so you'll see there's a lot of focus around the mask, and it's for that reason. This one, exploring graphic style mixed with the character and his bike. The client wanted me to explore options with a bike in it because the character does use a bike. I think it's important to note too that you'll see a lot of these samples are very different from each other, and that's because you never want to sort of pitch in the same umbrella. You always want to try to hit multiple angles. The client doesn't want to see the same thing 5 times. You want to be able to show them different things and get their brains moving, help them generate thoughts. More graphic options, more bike options. You'll see that this is a female figure here, but the client, when I'm walking them through this, they understand that I intend to put alter the main character there. This is just to show proof of concept. We're showing proof of concept. This one's a sample where I wanted the character to feel small with a big world around them. I think it feels a little bit more a lot more tension because the character feels so small within the world. That's a neat little trick you can do, small character, big bad guy in the background. Another mask-focused one. Close-up of the character. Something else I want to mention too is in design, I did mention about 10 different design principles, but sometimes it's okay to kind of break the rules a little bit and break the mold a little bit. And this is one example of that. I will explore with turning logos sideways, making them a little bit smaller, or making them go past the composition. So there's always room to kind of explore these different moves within reason. So as long as that logo is legible, you can read this, then I think it's okay. So in this case, this is something I wanted to show the client how I'm thinking, trying different things. Another thing I like to do is have the logo be interacting with the character or the key art itself. So you'll see here a lot of times I'll have overlapping elements over the logo. I think this helps add depth to a key art in a subtle way. And then this is another graphic approach. Again, taking note that the sword is actually overlapping again. Now this one's another piece with a lot more dynamic energy. The character is jumping off the bike. But again, like I mentioned earlier, the character or the client did want to see the bike and a few of the concepts. So I had to make sure that I covered that avenue. This one's a little bit more graphic, montagey, but I want to point out that even though there's a lot going on in this scene, there's a little world down here. There's a character and a bridge in here. Some of the elements of the world are in there, and then you have the main character. It's still simple. There's a lot of going on within this image, but it's still very simple. And the reason is because I've figured out a way to contain it within the character to make it simple, to make it easy to read. So theoretically, you should be able to read this once again at a thumbnail size. This is another graphic approach, exploring the bike once again. So we have the main character in profile with some graphic streaks going by to kind of reinforce movement and motion. And then you have the bike coming down here at the end. This one's another more kind of iconic, straightforward shot. Big world in the background. Again, I'm playing with how do we see the logo, trying it vertical or horizontally. And then you have the character standing in front of the motorcycle. Another thought, another simple idea was thinking, I love this mask. How do we make use of it in key art? So in this one, I wanted to show maybe he's looking at his mask and seeing his reflection in the mask. And then this is a little bit more of a simple approach, doing a sort of hyper-real, hyper-lit character, straightforward, looking at camera, engaging with the user or the viewer of the composition. And then another version of possible ways to show dynamic energy with the bike, the character jumping off, leaping off the bike. And then this one, I was trying to what's called break the fourth wall. I wanted the viewer to feel more engaged with the piece of key art. So you could see the character's looking directly at camera. The camera is at the lower point of the bike looking up, and then you have the beautiful world behind him. And another approach, this is more of a montage style again, utilizing the character in a small way to make him feel like sort of overwhelmed by the large world. And then a graphic approach, right? We talked about different types of treatment. So again, I'm trying to explore ways to make this beautiful iconic mask work. So we're doing it in this sense, we're doing it in a graphic way. And then I added a little bit of storytelling narrative on top of the logo here. So we have a little bit, and it's still done in a simple way, right? We could read this at a thumbnail size. So moving on to reference. Every time I do a presentation, I do add reference to each slide, but I like to add references at the end of the slide as well. References for color, treatment, stylization, composition. Reference can be used for all sorts of things. One of the things that I've found when using reference for a client is sometimes the client will look through your reference and they'll see something. They'll see something that they really, really like. For example, maybe they see this mask, how is it lit? And then it begins to generate ideas for the client as well, right? So we're still subtly helping the client figure out what they're looking for and how we can convey the messaging. And then this is more about process. So when a client, say a client picked one of those images that I pitched to them, we'll go through rounds. Sometimes rounds can last 5 rounds, sometimes rounds can last 100 rounds. But what we're trying to do is from A to Z with the key art, right? So they picked a concept, we started exploring initial sort of sketching and posing backgrounds. This is maybe like round 1 or 1 through 3. And then moving on to round 5 or 6, we start to refine details, angles, poses. We start to play with the cable that attaches to the earth. This is some of the client feedback I've received on one of my poses. So I went back and adjusted some of the elements on the character. And then moving on, we started adding the secondary character Zora. You can see here they gave me hair reference at probably around round 8 maybe. And then I sketched it out for them. This is maybe how you want to see it. And then we go in and we render that out, or if we have to, we do it with airbrush in Photoshop. And then sometimes the client will include reference for mood and tone. So this is a background image that they really liked and they wanted to see that sort of conveyed in their key art. So that ended up bringing us out of this water world, because this is a multi-world game. And it brought us into this sort of moody outer space kind of tone. And this being one of the final images towards the end, I think this was like round 12 perhaps. And so this was the last, this is the last round. This is the one that they chose. And then it went into finishing, which took about a 2. Enhanced all the elements, worked on the lighting, fixed all the polygons, addressed any last-minute notes, and then blew it up to about 4 times the size it was started at. And I believe that's it. I have 11 minutes left for a Q&A. Thank you for coming and checking out my presentation. I hope it's helped anyone. Q&A.
Oh, we can take a few questions. That was started 5 minutes later, so we have 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
Hello. So you told us about the emphasis on focal point and the concept thing, right?
Yeah.
So as artists, you want your art to not be just something that a pretty image, right? You want some concept and depth. But at times what happens is the big main character poster is the one everybody is going for, because the way you told us about BioShock, you need context to understand it.
Sure.
But at times when you have a very new IP or something, people don't have any context. So how do you balance the sellability or like commercialization of that art and the depth?
I think that's sort of the nature of this game, though. You will find clients that do want their character main center row, or they already have that idea in their head. Sometimes as an art director, you have the opportunity to say, hey, we can do that, but why don't we try something else? Or maybe there's an opportunity in specialty packaging where you can kind of do a little bit more crazy stuff because it's not the main promotional marketing image. I do see what you're saying, and that does happen. It's not for everyone. A lot of times, a lot of Call of Duties, for example, always focus on a figure in front, focal center, with a beautiful treatment and beautiful design and composition, whereas other ones like XCOM, for example, it never showed one single soldier. It showed an alien with human skulls. So there's different ways to approach it. I would consider XCOM 2 to be a much more conceptual idea in the sense that it has a lot of synergy, whereas Black Ops or Call of Duty is a little bit more, it's the brand you've come to know, and it's pretty consistent in how it treats its key art and characters.
Have you ever had any trouble with fonts and, legal trouble? I'm talking about somebody else coming for, copyrights and stuff.
Luckily, no, but that is an issue. So it's important that when you're creating a logo that you understand the rights usage. There are fonts that are commercially available and usable for free, and there are fonts that are not. If you use a font that is not, you don't pay for it, or you don't, and you have to make sure you get the right license for it. You have to make sure that you're pursuing the correct license and rights usage. You have to let them know you're using it for key art or websites or so on and so forth. So you do have to be careful of that. Just make sure you check the rights.
Have you ever actually gotten in trouble for, using another person's art style?
No.
That doesn't happen, right?
If you can, there's a difference between taking inspiration and copying, right? So I think it's okay to be inspired by something, but not necessarily copy it, right? We're all inspired by each other. I'm inspired by tons and tons of artists, but I think again you've got to remember be inspired by it. Take it that way, but don't just directly rip it off, right? Because whenever you do that, people will catch it and give you flack for that.
Hello.
Hi.
Really nice session, by the way. I
Thank
really
you.
enjoyed it, and I hope a lot of other people also enjoyed this. My question to you is that in the pitch deck, we all did see a lot of references used and a lot of churned out ideas that you were pitching, right? And in those churned out ideas, there were some images that were of the character in the game, Exilage, and there were some ideas that were not of the character, right? So I wanted to ask, in the ideas with the character, are you using a 3D model and making those things, or are you using pre-existing designs?
So sometimes this client in particular sent me a bunch of in-game screenshots. Okay. So I use that when I can. However, I'm not the best sketch person. I can't draw that character, at least fast enough for a presentation. So that's why I use, you'll see characters that aren't in the game.
Yeah.
But when I'm pitching this to a client, I explain before I start my presentation, these are just rough sketches or rough ideas. We're just doing a proof of concept. So sometimes you have the assets, sometimes you don't. In this case, it was about 50-50. I got in-game screenshots, and then I couldn't, I had to use what I could find to convey the concept.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
We can only do the last question, which is coming from here. I'm really sorry, but maybe Justin can meet some of the folks outside.
I can.
I don't know.
I can do that.
Perfect.
Hi, right here. Very nice presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
But I just got a glimpse of it because I arrived late, so I'm not sure if you covered this already. Where does AI play into this? Because I don't know where things are at the moment because people are divided on use it, not to use it. It's a little confusing, but I want to know, in your mind, where is it going in terms of key art? And if so, if we are forced to use it, how would you come into the pipeline? How would you use it?
Well, I guess I wasn't going to be able to avoid this question. I'm glad, but it's here. I use it personally, but I use it in a way that, for example, these concepts that I showed you, some of the characters are AI character poses, right? It streamlines my work process. But as far as using AI assets within the key art itself, it's not a thing that we're doing currently. Just because what the problem is, AI steals everybody's photography or everybody's art, and then it compiles an image for you. So it's stolen from 10 people to make one image. So obviously it's not usable. So I would recommend that if you are going to use AI, use it to your benefit in the sense that you can help your presentation out with your concept or your ideas. You can flesh out ideas better. Maybe you need a pose of a character jumping with a sword, and you can use that asset instead of me having to use a screenshot of a random person. Where do I see it going in the future? We'll always need people, art directors, to give direction, right? But as far as use case in art, I don't see it just yet, other than proof of concept or trying to establish some sort of mood through the AI. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Thank you so much, Justin. This was really cool.
Thank you.
And Justin, if you don't mind, there were a few people who wanted to ask some questions, so maybe you can make yourself available outside. Just give him a few minutes, and then he may be around. We will continue with the second session now.
Right.